It's a total eclipse of the sun, well, more or less, as it is the total eclipse of the presidency of Donald J. Trump. Not just because he was captured, at least in the Lego version, escaping from Air Force One, or Air Force One as we now call it, given his Benjamin Buffon. He was leaving Marco Rubio and the entire Washington press corps to perish on board the presidential jet, though he had escaped it for another jet in a catering cart. You couldn't make it up. Not just because of the clearly visible putrefaction of Donald J. Trump at both ends, falling asleep at vital Oval Office events with far greater regularity and narcolepsy than Joe Biden ever did, but he is accompanied by his health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his hands shaking like a leaf. I don't know, maybe he was pining for a substance or two. Not just because the elections are now looming as ominously as that total eclipse that you just watched, and thanks to our brilliant backroom team for capturing it, that will be the end, effectively, of Donald Trump's presidency. And who knows, he was out playing golf on the fairway just yesterday with a mobile missile launcher on the fairway beside him. He is going to hell in a catering cart. And so are the German government. The hapless Mr. Merz, the German equivalent of Inspector Clouseau, who was played by an Englishman of Indian heritage, but now this metaphor is getting too complicated. On with the show. It's live. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. Well, the next one will be 2090. I'm unlikely still to be around, and if I am, I'll probably not be presenting the show, as I'll be 120 or something of that order. So it is an extraordinary event. I saw the last one in Portugal in 1999, and an extraordinary event it was. It felt like the end of the world, and maybe it was. At least the end of the world that we knew. We are now all going to hell in a high cart. We are going to hell in a different kind of cart from the one that Donald Trump was skulking in Turkey. It's worth analyzing just what happened there. Donald Trump, the man that said, "Fight, fight, fight," the last time they threatened to assassinate him, tried to assassinate him. I wonder why we never heard any more about that subject. I wonder why Donald Trump doesn't mention it every time he gets up to speak. I wonder why we know nothing about the man who fired the shot and who was promptly shot dead on the principle that dead men tell no tales, and a brave man in the audience lost his life on that occasion. Was that real or wasn't it? I suppose we'll have to wait to find out. But he sure wasn't shouting, "Fight, fight, fight," when he got the news that the Iranians were going to try and bring down Air Force One. No, he lied to everyone on the plane, as well as everyone watching, that the President of the United States of America, the Commander-in-Chief of the most powerful armed forces the world has ever known, he went up the steps, he spoke to the reporters. No doubt he spoke to little Marco Rubio, and then he exited on the other side of the plane, going down in a conveyor to a catering cart. God knows how they found a catering cart big enough to accommodate him. They definitely must have cleared out all the peanuts and crisps before he fitted into it, and then he skulked, it's the only word for it, to an unmarked military plane, took off and flew back to Washington. Flew to London, actually, I think. Whilst everybody else in the plane was facing imminent, total eclipse, facing imminent demise, thinking the commander-in-chief was up the front of the plane. Now, say what you like about Joe Biden, I don't think he would have done that. I think the ignominy of that would have been too great. Did Trump expect that no one would ever find out what he had done? What an act of cowardice from the 5-time draft dodger, who definitely wasn't prepared to be found dead lying face down in a Vietnamese paddy field. His bone spurs affected him, couldn't serve. But his bone spurs have allowed him a life of disco dancing with Jeffrey Epstein and pounding up that aforementioned fairway ever since. Donald Trump's presidency is in very deep trouble. Indeed, the man seems to have lost all touch, all contact with reality. He's inventing prices at the pump above all. And he is presiding over an economy in the United States that is stock market rich, but Main Street poor. Main Street is struggling even to survive. Rents in Manhattan just reached an average of $6,500 per month. No wonder the mayor of New York is trying to bring in rent controls. But all over the United States, infrastructure is crumbling. Natural disasters are happening without an appropriate response, with a response worthy of poor countries, the kind of poor countries continually reviled by the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Infrastructure crumbling, disasters happening, shootouts at the local malls, cinemas, schools, colleges, clubs, with monotonous regularity. There's a sense, just like in this eclipse that we are right now experiencing, of everything sliding out of control, of greater powers, greater forces at work than those that we see on our screens who are supposedly controlling events. And to make matters worse, I did tell him to prepare for an October surprise. It's come early. The Iranians have said they have no intention of dealing with Donald Trump any longer, that the man who calls them a liar is the biggest liar that there has ever been on the international stage. A man who's not in control of his voice, his words, or, it would seem, his bowels. He is falling asleep at the wheel on television in some of the most spectacular, sordid examples of gerontocratic governance that the world has ever seen, at least when Chernenko was the leader of the Soviet Union and barely able to bite his nails. They didn't put him on television every day, all day, giving unscripted remarks to reporters that he insults, even when they are right. The Iranians have, I think correctly, interpreted all of this as this man is not in control of anything, not even himself, not even his bodily functions. And therefore they're going to wait till his presidency comes to an end, as it will come to an end in November. It is beyond belief that the Republican Party can retain control of Congress in November. It is difficult to imagine anybody at all going out to vote for this state of affairs, domestic and international. It is almost certain that the worst opposition in recorded political history, leaderless, with cackling Kamala Harris still in the wings, and toothy Gavin Newsom like a spectre, like a ghost at the feast. The worst opposition in history is going to inherit, quite possibly, a landslide victory in the American congressional elections. And if he loses both houses of the Congress, as I predict he will, and if he loses them by a sufficient margin, the rot will set in absolutely immediately. daily, weekly impeachments of Donald Trump will occur in the House of Representatives. They'll get a majority in the Senate, but they need a 2/3 majority to remove him from office. But the day will come, and it might not be far distant, when Republican senators will realize that the game is up, the writing is on the wall, that this crime family, more criminal than any of the 5 families running the mafia in New York, can no longer be afforded, literally and metaphorically, by the United States of America. He inherited a $37 trillion deficit. This week, it turned 40 trillion deficit. He has run up $3 trillion more of a deficit than he inherited less than 2 years ago. It is rakes progress. It is glory days for the Trump family, but I predict they'll have to give a great deal of their ill-gotten gains back. But it is a disaster for America. He's threatening Denmark again, posting memes of him looking over the horizon of Greenland. He landed an oil company with oil drilling equipment, owned, of course, just like the reflecting pool, by his crony, his buddy, illegally, with the intention of beginning to drill for oil in Greenland, a territory controlled by his obeisant ally, Denmark, and an obeisant ally, a satrapy, a vassal state, like all the other European states. To which I move on. Germany is in such deep trouble that they are proposing the Starmer solution for, now it's there, it's all, look at that, there is the eclipse, a suitable metaphor for the political careers of so many of our leaders. Let's start with Merz. Merz, down at 13%, is now facing a coup d'etat within his own party. Exactly the kind of thing that happened to Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister. You remember him? Seems like so long ago. Keir Starmer, the block of wood was removed by his own party, and they had to gerrymander all kinds of things in order to ensure that a suitably docile leader could be placed in his stead without any need for any election at all. Never mind the British public having a say in who should be their Prime Minister, who is effectively the President of the United Kingdom. Nobody, please, believe that King Charles has any role other than talking to the trees and hugging the trees. He is running nothing. Britain is effectively a presidential system, and therefore a new president has been foisted upon us without the people having any say at all, without even the members of his own party having anything to say at all. Mind you, maybe a glimpse of an eclipse in the war policy of the new Prime Minister, because the former defense attaché at the British Embassy in Moscow has let it be known in, I think, the Daily Telegraph, that the British are anxious to restore a kind of hotline between London and Moscow in case any accidents should lead to a wider war. Well, why the British think that the Russians would be interested in receiving a phone call from London when London is up to its neck in the murder of innocent civilian people, old age pensioners, children on beaches, workers in factories and warehouses, people asleep in their beds in high-rise buildings deep inside Russia. Why Russia would be interested in restoring a hotline to a country which so viscerally hates them, or at least its regime does, is of course open to question, but endlessly pragmatic. Maybe the Russians will agree to it. But the fact that the British have let it be known that that's what they seek is a measure of how dangerous they see the current international situation. President Putin said today that they intend to respond in kind to any attempt to seize Russian commercial vehicles or vehicles that are acting on behalf of Russia, like the so-called shadow fleet, which merely means ships that are not insured at Lloyd's of London. Trust me, nobody will be insured at Lloyd's of London in the few years to come. The shadow fleet boarding by French and English mariners on television with weapons, storming onto commercial vehicles that have every right to be in the international waters they're sailing, must now come to an end, said the Russian leadership. And if not, they will respond in kind. That means that they will board British, French, and other NATO country commercial vehicles, ships, and others. The Archduke Ferdinand just took a wrong turning down a street in Sarajevo. That is the beginning of World War III. That's what the British are worried about. They're worried that the Russians have lost patience with pretending that they're fighting the regime in Kiev, when in truth they are fighting 27 regimes running the NATO war machine. The Russians have lost patience with it. There are elections coming up in Russia, and those elections are very important for President Putin. He's not up for re-election, but if there was any sign that he was losing his overwhelming popularity in the country, shown in those elections, that would make the rest of his presidency not untenable, but definitely much more difficult. And his international stature would be commensurately reduced. And so the parties that are supporting the war, especially those parties that want the war prosecuted rather more roughly than Putin has been prepared, it's going to be very interesting to watch. And that's one of the reasons for Putin's statement today. It's one of the reasons for the toughening up, at long last, of Russia's posture in the special military operation, as they call it, the war, as the rest of us call it. And that has widened the war aims. You've heard me speak so many times about Odessa, the quintessential Russian city, more Russian than any other city, founded by Catherine the Great, a Russian jewel, once in the crown, but now ruled by the thief of Kiev, whose march with the Azov battalion and the other proto-fascist formations that make up the muscle of the regime in Kiev has got to come to an end, according to public opinion, according to Duma, parliamentary opinion in Russia, according to all the commentators, and now, finally, according to Putin himself. I think there will be an invasion of Odessa. Might be land-based, coming out of the Zaporizhia front, might be amphibious, might come from the sea, because Russia now absolutely controls the Black Sea. The fantasy that the Black Sea was now a NATO lake is laid bare as just that. Odessa is now blockaded from both sides, land and sea. Ukraine has effectively become a landlocked country. It's a total eclipse coming soon of the Kiev dictatorship that had no cards when Donald Trump said it many months ago now, and has still fewer cards today. There's no elections coming up in Ukraine. I think the Ukrainian people will deal with President Zelensky rather more peremptorily than by voting him out of office. These are my thoughts. We'll hear what Scott Ritter and our guests and callers tonight have to say. It's a total eclipse of so much, but it is a total eclipse of the sun. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taipei, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, before I read you the poll, let me tell you, if it's not obvious, I have nothing whatsoever to do with this poll this evening. And I don't approve of it, don't endorse it. If nominated, I will not accept. If elected, I will not serve, as somebody once said. Is Tucker Carlson right that George Galloway should be British Prime Minister? I'm encouraged by the overwhelming result, and you can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com. I like to think that those who voted no want to keep me here in the chair for MOATS rather than lose me to 10 Downing Street. Is Tucker Carlson right that I should be Prime Minister of Britain? He said it, I'm glad to say, on British television, and the commentator who had tried for the last decade to pretend that I didn't exist found it difficult to answer. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 85550 MOATS, MOATS, or 85550 66287. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0800 229 4411. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Scott Ritter is, of course, the oracle on all matters of politics and war. He's helped us through this entire conflict right from the very beginning, and he's always generous with his time. He joins us now. Scott, let's start, if we may, by the absolutely ignominious exit of the President of the United States in a catering cart at the airport in Turkey, having with full panoply climbed on board Air Force One. He skulked out the other side of the plane, was lowered by a crane and packed into, must have been a large catering cart, not telling anyone, even little Marco Rubio, that he'd gone. Marco thought he was snoozing up front or whatever else he does on these overnight flights. But in fact, he was no longer on the plane. And if there had been an Iranian assassination attempt, the entire Washington press corps, which might not have been so widely mourned, and Marco Rubio would have been done and dusted. But as a metaphor for the eclipse of his presidency, it serves quite well, I think.
Yes, Prime Minister. It does indeed. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Look, the you have to take the security of the president seriously. I mean, this is a given. But to be honest, to allow the president to fly to Turkey in a threat environment that could produce this outcome is absurd in the extreme. It's a failure across the board. If in fact there was a threat to the president of the United States that was worthy of this kind of, tomfoolery, then why did the president fly to Ankara to begin with? The reason why I bring this up is that there was no threat against the president of the United States, no real threat. But the president has surrounded himself with insane people, literally crazies who will breathe life into the most ridiculous, social media-based rumor, whether it comes from Sarah Adams or it comes from Laura Loomer or some other, equally insane Islamophobic people who have projected onto Iran the very things that we do. Understand there's a lot of American projectionism taking place here because we do assassinate leaders. We did kill the supreme leader. You know who doesn't assassinate leaders? Iran. Especially if Iran is in the process of negotiations to bring an end to a conflict. So there was no real threat to this president. Moreover, if there was, my God, the shame of being willing to sacrifice, because the implication here is that Air Force One was at risk. And so now you are going to sacrifice Marco Rubio. You're going to sacrifice the press corps. Why didn't you take their lives into consideration? Because clearly you didn't announce that the president was leaving Air Force One, so you're keeping Air Force One out there as a live decoy. This is shameful. This requires congressional intervention, but there won't be. Why? Because this was just a game. This was a sham. This was a joke. This is an act of theater, and it shows the lack of professionalism throughout the Trump administration. I mean, this is a man who has shown that he has no pride in who he is or in what the office that he holds is. No American president should ever allow himself to be evacuated in that fashion. If you believe that there was a threat, you give a press conference and you say, I'm getting on this airplane, and if this airplane's shot down, nuclear weapons will strike the following targets. And we have a second round of nuclear weapons that'll strike, additional targets as they emerge. To attack an American president is to attack the United States, and the United States will destroy anybody who attacks. This is what a real man does. But he wouldn't have had to make that speech because he would have had real intelligence services that would have said, Mr. President, it's just a rumor. Every time the president flies anywhere in the world, there's always threats to his life. I mean, there's crazies out there just whispering nonsense. There's chatter. But we never evacuate the president through using a catering car to a secondary aircraft. Why? Because our intelligence services are professional enough to see through the chatter and understand the chaff from the wheat. And where were they now? Well, gosh, we lost Tulsi Gabbard. We have a politicized intelligence service that takes orders from Laura Loomer. I mean, Laura Loomer has the ability to call up the White House and get people fired. She got the deputy national, the director of the national intelligence removed from his position. How the hell does that happen in a nation that is mature and responsible? It doesn't. That proves that the Trump administration is a child's playground. And like children playing, you come up with fancy scenarios and you carry out fancy escape plans that are meaningless other than the fact that they expose you as a child and probably leave us being treated like a child down the road.
It's worth mentioning for those who don't know that Laura Loomer is forbidden to own a firearm, having been twice committed, sectioned under the mental health legislation by her own father, and has led a life, how shall we say, which has been controversial, tumultuous, to say the least. But she's on speed dial with the President of the United States, and as you say, is able to affect the course of business in the White House to a very remarkable degree. Now, I've been saying that the Iranians were going to deliver an October surprise to Donald Trump. Looks like they have early by saying that they're actually not going to deal with Donald Trump anymore. They believe that his word cannot be trusted. You talked about projection. He's forever calling them liars when they're the ones telling the truth, and he's the one doing the lying. And they just feel that there's really no point in negotiating with a man like Donald Trump. That's an important development, isn't it?
Well, it's a massive development. This isn't about a period of months. This isn't, though, the president's on the last legs of his, presidential journey. He's midway through his term in office. We have midterm elections coming up in November. That means he has 2 years, 2+ years left to govern. And what the Iranians are saying is, we despise this man so much, we can't deal with this man so much that we're just not going to negotiate with the United States as long as he's the president. We don't trust you. There's nothing to be gained from this. They're saying that it's better to have an unresolved conflict than it is to negotiate in bad faith with negotiate with a person who negotiates in bad faith. This is the beginning of the diplomatic isolation of the United States, because this is going to create problems for the United States. Why? Bill, we have a global energy crisis that's linked to the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb Straits. This crisis needs to be resolved. So people are going to have to sit down with the Iranians and resolve this crisis. The United States isn't going to be part of these negotiations. Iran says we're not going to listen to you. That means the United States is going to have to basically, allow other people to negotiate on its behalf. The United States of America, I mean, the world's most powerful nation, supposedly, has now been humiliated to the point that we can't negotiate an end to a conflict we lost, and we need to negotiate a way out of this. We can't negotiate because the other side simply views this as irrelevant, not worthy of discussion. This is going to be a humiliating reality for the United States going forward, because other nations will probably follow the same suit. One of the reasons why Iran doesn't take us seriously is that we don't bring anything serious to the table. Militarily, we've been defeated. We don't have the ability to continue this conflict. Economically, our threats of sanctioning are just a laughingstock of the world. The Iranians don't care. They've been sanctioned for 50 years now, and they'll write out any American sanctions. Politically, it's the United States that's isolated because of the deceitful behavior of this cult of personality that currently occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The Iranians aren't viewed as deceitful. Whatever the president says, the Iranian Aragchi is viewed as one of the most responsible, seasoned, respected foreign ministers out there right now. And the Iranian leadership is seen to be very pragmatic and responsible. They react to the excesses of the United States and Israel, but they're not the ones out there leading the way with atrocities and escalatory behavior. They simply solve problems that other people create. So what happens when Russia decides that it doesn't find the United States worthy of negotiations? Now, Russia, is a nuclear power, and the United States is a nuclear power, so I don't see it ever going to that direction. But, Russia's already hinted that, Kushner and Witkoff aren't really taken seriously anymore. Kash Patel is supposed to go there in October. Do the Russians take him seriously? The United States has become isolated because of the incompetence of the President of the United States. That's just the reality.
It is, and I'm glad you segued to the Russian front, as it were, because I did want to talk to you about that. The sense is that gloves are off and that the war has moved up not one gear, but several gears. If you look at the savage pounding of Kiev over this last week or so, if you look at the effective isolation now of Odessa, about which you and I have spoken before, which is effectively now cut off and facing the possibility of an invasion, either from the land, from the Zaporizhia front, or from the sea, intriguingly. I heard people speculating today. An amphibious assault, or maybe both, the landlocking of Ukraine. It certainly looks to me And I was talking to our old friend Larry Johnson just earlier today. It certainly looks like the war has moved up several gears, and that rapid progress may now be expected as General Winter looms on the horizon in the NATO war against Russia.
No, 100%. This is what we see today is a confluence of things. One is the patience of Vladimir Putin, the pragmatism of Vladimir Putin. George, you and I have sat down in Moscow and talked about this very topic. And we know that there was frustration amongst ourselves and amongst many in Russia about, the soft approach taken by Putin. Why is he not going for the kill? But I didn't really have the wool taken off my eyes on this one until June at the plenary session at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where Putin addressed the audience and never once mentioned the war. And I realized at that point in time that Vladimir Putin is a man who is looking at this problem from a bigger picture. The economy was very important. The potential of creating a stable economy capable of receiving investments, very important. You couldn't do that if you expanded the war irresponsibly. Why didn't he do this 2 years ago? Well, because economically they weren't ready yet. Politically, domestically, there were still some questions about, the control of the economy by the oligarchs. Had Putin firmly established a wartime leadership role? Diplomatically, had he secured assurances from the Chinese, the Indians, and others that if he expanded the conflict, they would continue to support him? And militarily, did he have a fully engaged defense industry ready to sustain this conflict without destroying the domestic economy? He went very slowly, refusing to escalate. But then you have the behavior of Ukraine and the collective West, which, regardless of Putin's, hands-off approach or, soft approach, got beat every step of the way. I mean, Vladimir Putin, even with the gloves on, beat the collective West. He beat Europe. He beat Ukraine. He beat the United States when it came to the Ukrainian problem. Today, Europe has no capacity to project power. They have no defense industry. The United States has been weakened and chastised because of Iran, no ability to intervene decisively. And Ukraine is just puttering on as a pathetic beggar state. So what was the solution that the Ukrainians and their Western allies offered? Expand the conflict irrationally. And you saw this with a 40-day drone war that Zelensky ordered in June 25th. But that was drawn up in Lambeth at Vauxhall, at MI6. That this was a British operation. You have some MI6 officer, jolly good show, boys. Now, what do we say we expand the conflict to Wildberries in the Azov Sea and Caspian to bring the pain home to the Russians? Why? To collapse Vladimir Putin, of course. That silly chap has no support amongst the Russian people. And 20 September is an election date, and we will alter the political reality and bring down Vladimir Putin. That's what we're going to do. And so the Ukrainians did it. And what happened? You suddenly gave Vladimir Putin political cover to take the gloves off. They struck Wildberry, which has no military function whatsoever. Vladimir Putin now is taking out the totality of Ukraine's, domestic distribution and storage capacity, destroying the Ukrainian economy in the process, along with defense industry and economy. By attacking Azov Sea and Caspian, you've given him permission to take out and shut down the Black Sea, which he's done successfully. And how much resistance he's getting from around the world? Silence. Nobody's talking about it because the world recognizes that Ukraine went too far, that Ukraine accelerated this conflict beyond that which the West was willing and able to support. The West cannot back Ukraine up on this. And so this is a conflict that Ukraine has given Russia all the tools necessary to defeat it rapidly. And as you said, we are looking at the rapid decline of Ukraine. This winter will be very cold, very dark, very black, very deadly for Ukraine. Winter is coming, and Zelensky's admitted he has no plan in place to deal with this. Everybody's hoping on the Moscow Maidan moment, which is supposed to be triggered by United Russia's electoral defeat at the polls on 20 September. But Vladimir Putin went to the Duma, which this is a Duma election, and basically secured their support by saying, should I be bolder? Yes. Do you really want me to be bolder? Yes. Well, I'm not going to be bolder, but thank you for the vote of confidence anyways. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. We love you, Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is who in their right mind but a deranged MI6 officer who knows nothing about Russia would think that you can, defeat electorally a man that holds 76% support rate. British Party. George, you're a wonderful man and you'd make a great prime minister, but even you would have difficult securing 76% support rate in England, okay, in the United Kingdom. No politician can do that but Vladimir Putin. And this is on his bad day. By the time we roll around to October, he's going to be up around September. He's going to be up over 80% support rate. It's insanity to think that this Moscow Maidan moment is going to work. And when it fails, it's, you've heard of economic bubbles where you burst it and the economy collapses. This is a propaganda bubble. They've built this propaganda bubble up that Russia's weak, Russia can't sustain this conflict, Putin is weak, Putin's, and when it fails, when Putin emerges from this stronger, and he will, the propaganda bubble collapses, and with it, any hope Ukraine has of continuing to engender support amongst an already disillusioned European and American alliance.
Well, you mentioned Lambeth, and very well. You made a very good impression of the chinless wonders in the MI6 headquarters. Have the British blinked today? There's a piece in the Telegraph today that the British are seeking to re-establish a kind of hotline to Moscow in order that accidents won't happen, and that the two countries end up at war with each other. That would be a somewhat one-sided war, not since Marciano fought Don Coquel, as I like to say. But the British have let it be known through a former defense attaché in Moscow that they really would rather like to resume contacts with Russia. Is that them blinking?
Well, it's them accepting reality. I mean, the bottom line is, under Keir Starmer and even prior to that, since Boris Johnson, but even prior to that, the British have, been infected with this Russophobia that projects Russia as weak, and the British is leading this very robust European pushback against Russia. And it's manifested itself recently in policies that talk about taking on the shadow fleet. And we've seen the British, I think in January, the British Royal Marines, very courageous Royal Marines. And I'm not picking on them because I like the Royal Marines, but I mean, my God, fast roping down on a defensive tanker. Hope you guys got some George's crosses for that one because it was awesome. So the Russians have just said enough of this. So they started positioning ships, off the English Channel to escort the shadow fleet through, daring the Royal Marines to come and get it. Come and get it. Come and get it. See what happens when you go up against, Russian special forces. And there's this great pressure to, on the part of Europe to start seizing Russian ships and selling them. You see Kali Kalas making this comment, we're going to seize the Russian ships. We're going to sell them. We're going to shut down the shadow fleet. And Putin came out today and said, nah, if you do that, we're taking your ships down to anywhere in the world. And I mean, imagine a British ship falling in behind a Russian icebreaker trying to make the Northern Passage and suddenly found itself surrounded by the Russian Coast Guard saying, Murmansk, baby, come, you belong to me. Or in the Pacific, because, where's the Brits in the Pacific? They don't exist. And suddenly somebody woke up and maybe Andy Burnham is the guy, Barnum is the kind of guy that asks questions. I mean, it'd be nice because I'd like to hear, because, he doesn't even pretend to be a foreign policy expert. So I would like to imagine a scenario where old Andy's sitting around the breakfast table at number 10, the future George Galloway breakfast table, and he says, hey, old boy, what happens if that Russian Navy vessel decides to engage us? What do we do? Well, Andy, we don't have a fleet. Then why are we thinking about engaging them? That's pretty stupid, isn't it? Well, Andy, you're probably right. Are we talking to the Russians? No, Andy, we're not. Well, Prime Minister says maybe it's time we start talking to the Russians. Let's get a back channel up. Let's stop this thing from getting out of control, because I think old Andy's more concerned about domestic problems than he is about foreign policy problems. And The Brit's got a whole bunch of domestic problems, and he doesn't need to be distracted by getting involved with a war that will probably end with the total destruction of his pathetic little island nation. No offense, George. If you take it over, I'm sure the United Kingdom will rise to its glory, and Scotland will be independent. But we'll see what happens.
Indeed. Well, look, I appreciate that, and I genuinely hope that that is what's happening. And circumstantially, you'd have to say that this blinking is coinciding, at least, with a new prime minister. You've got to hope that it's because he is asking those questions, and the answers that he will have got are exactly the ones you posited there. There's one thing you can say about Andy Burnham. He's not a foreign policy expert, but he did take one auspicious step in his political life, and that was to join, just at the wrong time, the Labour Friends of Israel, just as the entire country and the entire world fell out of love with Israel. But they've got a friend in Andy. Now they're facing an election, and all kinds of forces are now unleashed. I saw a party political broadcast on the television from one of the parties, Ben Gvir's, I think, which showed vomiting Palestinian prisoners, weeping Palestinian prisoners, being bullied and bludgeoned by Israeli guards and under the supervision of Ben Gvir. That's the kind of polity we now have. So I'm not sure if we should be hoping that Netanyahu holds on, because it looks to me like all the guys that are competing against Netanyahu are even more evil than he is. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I do think, look, Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the great political survivors of all time. People have been writing his political obituary for at least 3 previous elections. So it'd be foolish to bet against him, but I do think that the odds are stacked against him. Look, I'm somebody who has taken a firm stance that Israel should not exist, at least in its current manifestation, that this Zionist state is a cancer on society. It's committed war crime after war crime after war crime, and that the best way to get rid of it is to achieve its total political isolation, economic starvation, and make Israel uninhabitable for the bulk of the Jewish population who will opt to return home to Eastern Europe or wherever they came from, and creating a demographic shift that will allow for the creation of a Palestinian Arab controlled state. In order to do this, though, we need Israel to be seen as the cancerous, blob that it is. So I'm hoping that Netanyahu is defeated. I'm hoping Ben Gvir becomes the next prime minister, because he is so odious, he is so disgusting, he is so vile, that the world will have to turn its back on Israel and complete the process of strangling Israel to death. I know it's a tragedy for the Palestinian people, but they've been living a tragic existence for some time now. And keeping Netanyahu in office is not going to bring any salvation to them. What they need is Israel to die. They need Israel to die a rapid death. And I think Ben Gvir, as a prime minister of Israel, would facilitate the death of Israel, because nobody in the world can support him. Nobody. I can't imagine Ben Gvir coming to the United States Congress and receiving a standing ovation. The man is evil personified. These videos will haunt him for the rest of his life. He's playing to a very narrow, demented crowd of Israeli Zionistic fanatics. But that crowd doesn't exist anywhere outside of Israel.
No, and indeed I'm talking to a very senior rabbi after this in the second half of the show who rejects the whole idea of Israel, and certainly the conflation of Judaism and the Jewish people with the nationalistic poison of the likes of Ben Gvir. Now, just before I let you go, Scott, I was talking to Larry earlier about weapons that have changed warfare. And I began by asking him about drones, because it was said to me by someone who had fought in the war in Ukraine that not since the invention of gunpowder has anything changed warfare like drones have. So I ran that by Larry. We're doing a deep dive into weapons, a special MOATS special, which will go out probably next Sunday or Monday. But as I do have in you a very, very considerable expert, do you concur with the idea that drones have changed warfare forever?
100%. Look, I was just in, as you know, I was in Russia after we had our wonderful dinner at the Japanese restaurant with Steven Seagal. I headed to the Donbass, to Lugansk. It was a great night, and then on to Zaporozhye. I was supposed to go to Kherson and Crimea. This was a trip that I had began to negotiate in earnest back in March of this year. I met with members of the Russian military, people who I wanted to focus on drone warfare, and they concurred. They were like, yeah, let's do this. But by May, they were saying it's too dangerous. And I said, please, this is so important that I've got to be able to do this. And they let me go. I mean, the first night I arrived in Lugansk, under drone attack, a giant explosion as the Ukrainian drones struck the city. I went to Starobelsk to visit the site of the murder of 21 Russian students by Ukrainian drones, and had 2 Ukrainian drones attack me while I was in Starobelsk. I went to Gorlovka, a city under siege of drones. I went to, I drove on various iterations of the Highway of Death, where American-made Hornet drones are attacking haphazardly, Melitopol without electricity and water. And I couldn't go to Kherson because it was just deemed too dangerous. The Russians apparently value my life more than I do. And they said, we don't care how much you want to go, you ain't going. And on the way out, we were attacked by Hornet drones. Our convoy was attacked. I interviewed Russian drone operators from the Burevestnik unit, which operates in the Donetsk area. I interviewed the Kirvonis Battalion drone operators, and I interviewed the Archangelsk Drone Research Center. I interviewed Rogozhin, the head of the SARS Bars Sarmat drone unit. What I got from it is that this war is all about drones right now. Yes, there's armor, there's infantry, there's artillery. They all play a very important role. You haven't lost the basics here. But if you aren't doing drones, you're not gonna. Drones are involved in everything. They are involved in reconnaissance and fire support. The side that best employs drones is the side that doesn't. You can't get near the front line without being attacked by drones. You have to be careful in everything you do to prevent being detected by drones and destroyed by drones. If you move wrong, you're going to die by a drone. The Russians, every aspect of their plan, their operational plan, is built around drone employment, logistically, reconnaissance, fire support, etc. The same thing with the Ukrainians. These are drone armies coming at each other, and it was clear that, I'm somebody who takes pride in my time of service in the United States Marine Corps back in the Cold War, where we believed, rightfully so at the time, that we were the finest military that walked the face of the earth. We knew combined arms warfare. We knew maneuver warfare better than anybody. I know the Soviets will take exception to that. Thank God we never got to test it out on the field of battle. But if I took the Marines of the 1980s, 1990s, early 1990s, at the height of their performance, and brought them to the front line, and they'd be dead in 3 days. They wouldn't know how to fight. The tactics don't work. Nothing works. The logistics don't work. The command and control don't work. Nothing works. Everything has changed. Everything has fundamentally changed to adapt to the new reality of drone warfare. And if you're not an expert in drone warfare, you're going to be dead. So drones are the revolutionary. The revolution in military science right now. I'm going to be doing a documentary based upon what I learned there that's going to try and bring this reality to people. I mean, it's called the gray zone. The gray zone is that area between Ukrainian and Russian positions where drones dominate, and it's a dead zone. entering the gray zone is a suicide pact. That's how dangerous drones are. And yet today we have the Russians advancing, which shows that the Russians have are dominating the drone war. But, they have nothing but respect for the Ukrainian counterparts, and the Ukrainians will, flood the zone with drones 1 week and stop the Russian advance. The Russians will regain. It's the deadliest job right now in the war, is being a drone operator or involved in this. For the Ukrainians, they're losing over 100 of these guys a day to the Russians. The Russians are hunting them and killing them, but the Russians are hunting and killing the Ukrainians are hunting and killing the Russians. I wrote an article. It's in my Substack if people want to read it. It's chapter 2 of what I call the Trail of Tears, but it's about drone operators. But I talk about one particular drone operator who has been wounded 12 times. He's got permanent PTSD. And one of the questions I ask of all the drone operators is, what has drone warfare done to soldiering? And they say it's one of the most frightening developments isn't that the drones are killing people today. The frightening development is, what do we do with the people who have mastered this technology? Because you're watching yourself kill somebody, you're coming close, you're seeing their eyes. This is worse than a sniper. You're hunting down a human and then you're killing the human. And psychologically, you become immune to this. But at some point in time, the horror of what you've done comes home to roost. And we're going to have thousands of people when this war ends who are going to be permanently broken by this war, and that's because of drones.
Boy, am I glad I asked you that question. Thank you, and I hope the documentary comes out soon, and I look forward to reading your Substack, as I very frequently do. Scott Ritter, the maestro, thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. I'm sorry that overran, but I personally found it utterly riveting. I hope you did too. Let me go now to take a quick break, then it's your calls coming next. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, if you were as fascinated as I was by that segment that I just did with Scott Ritter about how drones have changed warfare, make sure you catch the deep dive that I've done with Larry C. Johnson on that very subject, which should be with you by Sunday. It'll go first to my patreon.com supporters as a reward for their fidelity to supporting the show, and read Scott Ritter's Substack and wait anxiously, as I will, for his upcoming documentary. Let's go to the phones. David in California wants to talk about the execrable Pete Hegseth. Well, at least he's execrable to me, David. How do you feel about him?
Okay, this is what it is, George. Now, my brother, who is now deceased, when he got out of the Marine Corps, went to school and became a paralegal for homeless vets. What he would have said about Pete Hegseth, I know he would have said this about Pete Hegseth if he was alive. He would have called Pete Hegseth frag bait.
Yeah. Explain.
Frag is when you're out of the jungle and there's somebody in your unit that's bringing a detriment to the whole unit. You pop them yourself.
Yes. I kind of thought that's what you meant. He wouldn't have lasted long at the hands of the grunts in Vietnam. He would have been fragged. I have no doubt about that. He must be the least distinguished leader of the American armed forces that there has ever been. And his antics, both before and since taking that job, render him not a fit and proper person, never mind to be a leader, but even to serve in the United States Armed Forces or the armed forces of any country. He is a low-life piece of scum. I saw him blow his nose on his hand and then run his hand through his hair as a novel approach to Brill Cream. And I thought when I saw it that absolutely summed him up. So your brother has passed away, but he would undoubtedly regard Hegseth as a disgrace to the uniform. Is that really what you're saying, David?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for calling us the mother of all talk shows to make that very point, as you did very pungently. Comments now. You can make comments by scanning the QR code on the screen. Nikia6571 says a garbage truck would have been more appropriate for hiding Trump. I don't know. If the catering cart had lots of hamburgers in it, it might have been appropriate. Ray Bull68 says, currently our next false flag in America might be developing right now with our water systems under attack that the FBI isn't letting the public know about. And FY says Kiev regime is a NATO proxy, which is an American empire vassal alliance. Extension of the American empire, and Russia has every right to defend themselves against it in the Ukraine or anywhere else. And Mr. Blamo RU says the Black Sea is now a Russian lake. And while we don't say invasion because we can't invade ourselves, we enter an area occupied by an enemy threat. And Tommy Ryans says, let's make George Galloway King of England and Gayatri our Queen. I'd very much like her to be the Queen, but I decline the throne myself. Graham in Jersey wants to talk about Trump, Israel, and Gaza, which nobody else is. Graham, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. Thank you so much for taking my call. I think I must be one of your oldest contributors because I can still remember running at full speed down to the air raid shelters in the 1940s with my family to avoid the bombs being dropped by the Nazis. But anyway, since my teenage years, I have lived in Jersey, and when locally you speak to people of a certain age regarding their experience of being occupied by the Nazis, you can understand why the people of the Channel Islands have so much sympathy for the Palestinians, whose land has been invaded by an occupying fascist neo-Nazi force with a similar policy and political creed to that of the Jersey occupation from 1940 until 1945. In the words of Professor John Mearsheimer, Israel is an apartheid state and not a democracy, and has been exercising a genocide since 2023 in order to get rid of all Palestinians and create a greater Israel. Also, in the words of Ilan Pappé, he said it reminded him of the language used by the Nazis in their abysmal treatment of European Jews. I would like to emphasize that at present, 93% of Israelis support the genocide in Gaza and in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Also, approximately 500,000 Israeli citizens have actually left Israel permanently, some going to Europe, others back to the United States, and others to Eastern Europe. And over 100 Palestinian communities have been displaced. Mr. Galloway, I took my family 50 years ago to Israel with my dear late mother. At the time, she was 83, 84 years of age. And we were detained and taken into custody by armed police simply because they had never heard of the island of Jersey and considered us some sort of political risk. I subsequently received an official apology from the Ministry of the Interior. Mr. Galloway, I know that in the United Kingdom, with the political demonstrations against the Israeli genocide, there have been former brave Holocaust survivors of advanced years who have been handcuffed and imprisoned for simply displaying and using a phrase which begins with "from the river." I won't finish it in case I finish up in jail. Well, I have the original wording of 50 years ago when I asked in Tel Aviv a group of young people about the future of Israel. In a mocking manner and sarcastic tone, three of the young hooligans replied in unison, "From the river to the sea, not one Palestinian will there be." That's something I've never forgotten, Mr. Galloway. Regarding President
Well, we'll
Trump,
never forget it either, Graham. Yeah, go ahead.
President Trump is a man with a malignant personality disorder and narcissistic tendencies. So he should be the last person to solve political problems either in the Middle East or Iran. This is the same man who, during COVID, said publicly that we may have to inject people with household bleach. Now, recently, he also referred to a particular country as the Islamic Republic of Japan. Now, his main negotiator for the peace settlement in Israel is his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It is interesting, Mr. Galloway, that Mr. Netanyahu, on his last visit to Washington, did not stay at the Israeli embassy or in a luxury hotel, but actually stayed in the luxurious home of Mr. Trump's son-in-law, chief negotiator Jared Kushner. This just shows that these two men have absolutely no respect for the indigenous Palestinians, and that between them they will work out a policy that is totally in favor of their joint Israeli-US policy, which is the continuation of this genocide. As I think I just quote
An
Mark
extraordinary
Twain.
call, Graham, perfectly, beautifully enunciated, and your history has not been wasted. Your knowledge and experience you managed to impart in a 5-minute telephone call to the mother of all talk shows more powerfully than any seminar from any academic could have done. And with your wartime experience and your experience of growing up in an island that was itself under Nazi occupation, and the courage and forbearance that you and your family have shown towards this question is a lesson to us all. And I very much hope that your call was heard by my next guest, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who is the rabbinic advisor to the Voice of Rabbis. I very much hope that he heard it. Very grateful to you, Graham. Just before the break, a big thanks to MOATS top donors so far this evening. You're amazing. Please keep your donations coming in. Become a MOATS donor, just like Neville Rapley, Zachariah Robinson, Martin Smith, forgive me, Martin, Morgs, Jamel Begar. Please go onto the MOATS.tv website tonight and give what support you can to support the show. Just scan that QR code there and that'll take you right to the website. A quick break, and then it's the distinguished rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, coming up next. Stay tuned. His approval ratings are in the toilet. He won a huge mandate, well less than a year ago, and he's thrown it all away. He has an approval rating of just under 40% now, and a disapproval rating of all the others. There are no don't knows in the issue of Donald Trump. And so he has maximized the number of people who hate him or dislike him, and he has systematically undermined the voting base that formerly liked him. And I don't know whether that is because of his donors, because he's intellectually challenged, because it's of his age. I really don't know.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
The distinguished Rabbi Shapiro is a well-known figure on social media. I personally have seen him make magnificent addresses to massive crowds of people, giving the lie, both in his words and their response to the idea that Zionism in any way equals Judaism. In fact, Zionism is a repudiation of the Jewish faith. It is a denial of the most basic tenets of the Jewish religion. And that's why I struggle so very hard, always, as I have always done all of my life, to resist the conflation, the false conflation of the Zionist, nationalist, political movement and the Judaic tradition. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is the rabbinic advisor to Voice of Rabbis, and he kindly joins me now. Rabbi, thank you for doing this. I understand you did hear the distinguished telephone call that I just took from a very elderly, must be very elderly gentleman from the island of Jersey, giving his experience as a lifelong sympathizer with the Palestinian people. And he cited several distinguished Jews, secular Jews. And in fact, it's crucial, isn't it, to remember the formulation I always like to highlight, that many Jews are not Zionists, and most Zionists are not Jews. And this is a duality we must never forget. Isn't that the case?
That's, first of all, thank you for having me. And second of all, that absolutely is the case. But it's not only that, it's that even the Jews that identify as Zionists don't have a consistent definition of Zionism. If you ask 10 Jews, 10 Zionists what Zionism is, you may get 10 different answers.
Yes, and we'll come to some of those answers, because I myself have seen this develop, having been 50 years in this issue. When I used to visit Tel Aviv, I found lots of people who agreed with my take, but there are not many of them in Shankin Street anymore. They're all living in Paris or Lisbon, or have gone back to the United States. The character of the Zionist state has, of course, been degenerating for decades. And even in comparatively recent times, we've gone from Rabin and Perez, much as I disagreed with them, down to Ben Gvir and Smotrich. There's a vulgarization, a brutalization amongst the Zionists that is clearly discernible to me.
Right, and the truth is that it's very important not only to ensure that we understand that Zionism isn't Judaism, but that Zionism was actually created to exploit Judaism, use Jews and Jewish identity as a human shield for their own political ends. I have over here in front of me a Supreme Court case transcript from Israel. We were talking about what the definition of Zionism is. And that's partly the problem, because Zionists will tell you, well, if you believe that Jews have right to self-determination, then that makes you a Zionist. So now 95% of people are Zionists. If they'll tell you that Jews have a right to be treated like everybody else, now you're a Zionist. So Zionists have this shtick, we call it in Yiddish. It means like it's a trick that they play word games and they don't define Zionism. Now, part of it is that they don't even have a definition for Jew that's consistent. Israel defines itself, here's the problem, as the Jewish state. But I'm sure you've heard the argument from Zionists that there's only one Jewish state, whereas there's, 20, 25, 28 Muslim states, right? The truth is that there's not a single Muslim state on this planet that's a Muslim state in the sense that Israel defines itself as a Jewish one. Israel defines itself based on the 2018 nation-state law, that Israel is not merely a state that's run by Jews. Israel is the nation-state of the Jewish people. In other words, in the words of Israel's own website, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I have a 2014 article in front of me written by Avigdor Lieberman. Quote, the term Jewish state refers primarily to nationality. Israel is to the Jewish people what France is to the French people, Ireland is to the Irish, and Japan is to the Japanese. In other words, if you have two people in France, a Jewish Frenchman and a non-Jewish Frenchman, say a Catholic Frenchman, what France is to the Catholic Frenchman, Israel is to the Jewish Frenchman. That means that Israel claims literally to be my country. Now, this Supreme Court case of Israel explains it well. According to Israeli law, Israel divides its citizens into various categories, three of which are religion, nationality, and citizenship. So we're talking about Israeli citizens, so 100% of the population of Israeli citizens have Israeli citizenship. Religion is whatever your religion is, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, whatever. But nationality, there is no Israeli nationality by Israeli law. It doesn't exist. Jewish is a nationality, Arab is a nationality, Druze is a nationality. There are about 120 or so nationalities by Israeli law, but Israeli is not one of them. Now, the problem with that is that Israel defines itself not as the state of the Israelis. Israel defines itself as the nation state of the Jewish nationality, like you heard from Avigdor Lieberman. Japan is to the Japanese what France is to the French, what Israel is to the what. Without Zionism, it would be Israel is to the Israelis. That's normal. But Israel is different than all other countries in the world. Israel, by law, says that France is the country of the French, Japan is the country of the Japanese. And what Japan is to the Japanese and France is to the French, Israel is to the Jews, not the Israelis. The 2018 nation-state law says that only Jews have self-determination rights in Israel, which means that although an individual non-Jew, doesn't matter if he's Muslim, Arab, Christian, whatever, although he has civil rights, he has no self-determination rights. That means only the Jews can govern themselves in Israel. Nobody can govern over the Jews in Israel because Israel's the state of the Jewish nationality. So in America, in England, whoever's an English citizen has an equal status there. And if the majority of the British citizens or the American citizens are Christians, Christians have a majority and they're running the country simply by majority rule. But in Israel, only Jews are allowed to run the country, which means they cannot allow for a majority of non-Jewish people in that country. Or if there will be a majority of non-Jewish people in the country, they'll have to figure out a way that the minority, the Jews, will still have the power over the majority. One of the two. Which is why, by the way, they can't just annex the West Bank and Gaza.
We call that apartheid normally, Rabbi, but it all is an extraordinary tangle of nationalism and religion. So why don't you, as an eminent authority, explain to the audience what are the differences between being Jewish and being a Zionist?
Sure. Being a Jewish means, according to the Jewish religion, that when God gave Moses and the Jewish people, who then in the book of Exodus just arrived at Mount Sinai from Egypt, the Torah, when God gave the Ten Commandments and the entire Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, that obligated all the people there and their children, maternal children, for all generations to follow the laws that were given to Moses. The rest of the world, according to Judaism, has to follow a covenant between God and Noah. 7 laws. Can't kill, can't steal, certain sexual immorality, you can't worship idols, you can't eat you can't eat a limb off a live animal, things like that. Basic civilization laws. 800 years after Noah, God gave a new covenant to Moses. Whoever received that covenant and their children, they are obligated to fulfill not the Noahide laws, but the Mosaic laws, we'll call them. Anybody obligated to fulfill those laws is a Jew. Now, this is important because it answers your question that I heard you mention when you were talking to David Miller the other day. Being a Jew, Judaism is a religion. It is not a nationality. It is not an ethnicity. You were 100% obviously correct when you said there are Chinese Jews, Syrian Jews, Yemenite Jews, German Jews, and they have absolutely zero in common with each other. Now, whenever you have a group where you call somebody the Jews, whenever you categorize people with the same name, they have to have something in common. Something. Otherwise, what are they? The thing that the Jews have in common is that every single person who's considered a Jew is, according to the Torah, according to Jewish law, obligated to fulfill the Judaic covenant. You had a question. Well, there are atheist Jews. And in other religions, such as Christianity, Islam, and maybe even all religions, I don't know, if you don't believe in the religion, you're not considered a member of the religion. So why are atheist Jews considered Jews? The answer to that is because of this unique characteristic of the Jewish religion. In Christianity, everybody ought to be a Christian, then they're saved. In Islam, everybody ought to be a Muslim, then they get the benefits. In Judaism, not everybody ought to fulfill the Mosaic covenant. If you want to, you can. Anyone can, that's called a convert to Judaism. But the rest of the world has a different covenant. It's the seven Noahide laws. There are Noahides, let's say, and Jews. According to Judaism, a Jew is somebody who is bound by the Mosaic, Judaic Torah covenant. It doesn't matter if you're compliant. If you're compliant with that covenant, then you're a religious Jew. If you're uncompliant with that covenant, or you don't even believe in the covenant, let's say you're an atheist, when we label you Jew, what we mean is that you are bound, obligated to that covenant, such that if you wanted to become religious, we would tell you, okay, you want to become religious, you want to follow the Jewish religion, you have to follow these laws. So if, let's say, 2 people come to me, let's say George Galloway and a non-religious Jew, both come to me together and tell me, we believe that the Jewish religion is true. I'm not trying to convert you now, George. Just bear with me. It's just an example. And we believe that God gave Moses the Torah, the Judaic religion is true. What do we do to please God? So I tell the non-religious Jew, you need to repent. You're already Jewish, means you're already a member of this covenant. All you need to do is repent. Stop being an atheist, be a believer, and repent. George, I would say, well, if you want, you have to fulfill the Noahide laws. You have an option to convert and then join the Judaic covenant. But Judaism is a religion, and the difference between Jew and non-Jew is the obligations, not what he's compliant with. If somebody is an atheist, we look at him for all practical purposes as a non-Jew. He's Jewish in the sense that we try to make him repent because God wants him to repent. We look at him that we try to bring him closer to God. We try to make him, encourage him to fulfill the Judaic covenant. And if he comes and he says, I want to be a good Jew, he doesn't need to convert. He's already Jewish. But that's all it means. As far as his status is concerned, his status is for all practical purposes, since he's an atheist, he's not a member of the Jewish people. That's the complicated reason why you can have Jewish atheists. Now, the Zionists came and they said, okay, we don't like this. They decided that the Jews, and anybody who was not religious, did not identify as a Jew. With some quirky exceptions, perhaps Benedict Spinoza was one of them, depends who you ask. Somebody who was not religious, he was an atheist, did not identify as a Jew. The problem is that in the late 1800s, mid 1800s, there were a lot of anti-Jewish pogroms, which targeted non-religious Jews. Because of the emancipation, because of the Enlightenment, a lot of Jews became non-religious. And they thought we're assimilated. We're not really Jews. We're Frenchmen, we're Germans, we're Russians. But in the pogroms, the anti-Semitic attacks targeted them as well as the religious Jews. And so the non-religious assimilated Jews had an identity crisis. Are we really Jews? We're not Jews. Jews are those guys. And they weren't particularly fond of Jews. They didn't really like Jews, the religious Jews. The religious Jews are backward. The religious Jews in their eyes were primitive. They were anachronistic. These people were enlightened, assimilated, modern people. They didn't want to be Jews. But the problem is the non-Jewish world would not let them be non-Jews, even though they tried. So there are various different answers to this identity crisis. There was communism. A lot of Jews went to communism, and the idea behind communism, if you believe in it, that everybody's going to be treated equal, so maybe the Jews will be treated equal. There was Bolshevism. There were various different isms, even amongst the non-Jews in the days of the Enlightenment and emancipation. There were all sorts of isms. One of the isms was Zionism. Zionism, by definition, is very simple: Jewish nationalism. They figured, you know what? The non-Jews, there's anti-Semites. You know why? Because we're still associated with the Jewish religion. Let's change the definition of a Jew from a religion to a nationality. Let's give the Jews a flag. Jews never had a flag. There were 12 tribes in the Old Testament. Each one had a flag. Each one was a family, right? In the olden days, a family, a house, a tribe, it was all the same thing. Each one had a flag, each one had a lifestyle, each tribe had a culture, but the Jews collectively never had a flag. Let's give them a flag, because nationalities have flags. Let's give them a language. Let's resurrect Old Hebrew. Old Hebrew was a language that rabbis used and Jews used in their prayers. Since biblical times, we hadn't spoken Hebrew. Even during the Temple period, the Second Temple period, Jews spoke Aramaic. But no, let's resurrect ancient Hebrew, because part of nationalism is the national language, which is why Americans and Britons relate to each other better. Americans, Britons, Canadians, we consider you closer to us than, let's say, Chinese or French, because we speak the same language. We have this, let's give the Jews a culture, a flag, land, let's get a land. That's the hardest part. And they finally got a land. The purpose of getting Palestine, as opposed to Uganda, which was also one of the options, was that Theodore Herzl and the Zionists said, in order to make the Jews look at themselves, not just let's change the Jews. Changing the Jews means let the Jews look at themselves as a nationality. The idea was they'll change their aspirations. Instead of wanting to do what Jews want to do, Jews want to study Torah, pray, learn, serve God. That's what religions do. The aspirations is to become pious, to become scholarly. That's what religions aspire to. But that's bad. That resulted in anti-Semitism and pogroms. What we need is for the Jews to aspire to winning Olympic gold medals, to have a strong army, to win Eurovision song contests, to be proud nationals. But to do that, we got to get the Jews to look at themselves as nationals. So what they did was they took every Jewish religious concept, holy things, and changed them from holy things to national things. They took the Holy Land, the land of Israel, we call it Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land, was looked at not as a national homeland. A homeland means the place the people were born in. In Hebrew, they call it Moledet. French, La Patria. There's Mother Russia. In nationalist philosophy, there's an organic connection between a people and the lands that birthed them. They said, we're going to take the Holy Land. And all it is a Holy Land. According to us, the Holy Land is a giant synagogue. Just so there are holier days than others. We have high holy days, less high holy days, days that aren't holy. There are places that are more holy than others. That's the holiest place in the world. And when you walk into it, you walk into the Holy Land with trepidation. And the only reason you go there is to serve God, which is what Jews have been doing there for centuries. The Zionists said, you know what, let's switch the holy language into a national speaking language. Let's switch the Holy Land into a national homeland. We'll make it the homeland of the Jews. We'll take concepts that Jews already hold dear, but we will change them from religious value to national value. And we're going to make the Jews look at themselves differently. We're going to make them want to be strong and powerful like an army. The character traits that Jews would consider a successful character is studious, peace-loving. Who is strong, our sages say? He who conquers his urges. The Zionists didn't like all of this. They believed that this caused anti-Semitism. They looked at the Jews as cowards and weak. And even today, there are Zionists that actually run around saying, religious Zionists, that the reason why there's so much anti-Semitism and the reason why the Palestinians don't give in is because the Jews don't realize who they are. They're still trying to make peace. They shouldn't make peace. Instead, they should be nationals, and nationalism should carry the day. The land is the national land of the Jews. So they made laws that this land is the Jews are a nationality. It's Israeli law. In fact, Israel's Jewish Agency Status Law, 1952, get a load of this. Article 1. The state of Israel regards itself as the creation of the entire Jewish people. Do you hear a crazy thing like that? The state of Israel, never mind the state of Israel regards itself as unintelligible because states don't have minds. But the state of Israel regards itself as the creation of the entire Jewish people. Article 5. They didn't ask me. They didn't ask they didn't even ask the majority of the Jewish people. They decided that they're the spokesmen of the Jewish people. Theodor Herzl, in his book, has a chapter called Negotiarum Gestio, that he decided that the Zionist movement has a right to speak on behalf of the Jewish people, and they still do it today. Netanyahu says he's the leader of the Jewish people. He came to America to speak to our Congress about Barack Obama's Iran deal, saying, I come representing not only the people who voted for me, but all the Jews all over the world. Article 5, the mission of gathering in the exiles, which means everyone moving to Israel, which is the central task of the State of Israel and the Zionist movement in our days, requires constant effort by the Jewish people in the diaspora. The State of Israel, therefore, expects the cooperation of all Jews in building up the state and assisting immigration to it of the masses of people, and regards the unity of all sections of Jewry as necessary for this purpose. So the State of Israel said, look, we're all a nation, we are your state, we're your leaders, you follow us, we're your spokesmen. And in fact, that Supreme Court case that I mentioned, Israel, that's why Israel doesn't have a Israeli nationality. Because the problem is not really that the State of Israel exists. The problem is it does not exist. The State of Israel, as such, exists only on paper. It's a doing business name. It's officially the state of the Jewish people, the Jewish state, doing business as the State of Israel. There is no Israeli nationality. You could be an Italian national, a French national. You cannot be an Israeli national. The nationality is Jewish. Now, Israel was sued. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court by 21 appellants. Jewish, non-Jewish, but most Jewish, and said it's not fair to the non-Jewish citizens of this country that we don't have an Israeli nationality. Why should we cut them out of the actual meaningfulness of this country? And the answer, and they said, no, we're not going to have a Israeli nationality. I'm going to quote you now from Justice Uzi Vogelman explaining why. Quote, the appellants argue, for example, that it is impossible to define the whole of world Jewry as belonging to the Jewish nation. For the Jews are all of the nationality of the states of which they are citizens. Now that's true. That's what the appellants argued. The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism. And because Zionism says so, they're not going to make a Israeli nationality. According to Zionism, the Jews are a nationality. If you want to know what Zionism is, it's the idea that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the state of that nationality. Now, this is important to the Israelis for political reasons. You know why? Listen to something else that the Supreme Court said. The president, that means the leader of the judges, the head judge, added that in his view, the principle of the right to national self-determination was intended to apply to nations and not to fragments of nations. In his opinion, recognition of an Israeli nationality, such nationality, might lead to national and social fragmentation of the entire nation. The president added that a separatist trend of splitting the Jewish people was unacceptable, meaning that the only reason why, in Zionist view, in their Supreme Court, Israel has a right, the Jews have a right to self-determination in Israel, is because all the Jews together want that right. They're all fulfilling that right. They're demanding that right. If you're going to say that it's just the Zionists and not the Jews as a nationality in toto that want this land, that want a country here, then they have no right to self-determination. Israel's claims against the Palestinians is based on, according to Israel's Supreme Court, the right to self-determination. Even if it's not democratic or it is democratic, it doesn't matter. The right to self-determination is only based on the Zionist idea that all the Jews are one nation, one nationality, a political nation, and Israel is the state of that nation. They will never give this up. What makes this worse is that later on, the Supreme Court says, quote, nota bene, a person cannot belong to two nations. If an Israeli nationality is to be recognized, the members of the Jewish nation in Israel will have to choose between two options, whether they are Israeli, and then they will not be Jewish, or whether they're Jewish, and then they will not be Israeli. The same applies to the members of the other minority groups. Meaning, I'm an American and I'm Jewish. The Israeli government is telling me that you have a choice. You're either part of the Jewish nation or the American nation. Now, you probably know that in 1917, when England was considering the Balfour Declaration, there was one Jewish member of the cabinet. His name was Edwin Montague. Edwin Montague said, I am against the Balfour Declaration because if you pass this, if you make the Jews a nationality and you make a Jewish state, which means that it is the state of all the Jews to the exclusion of the countries the Jews live in, then you're making the Jews foreigners in their own countries. And that's what Zionism does. That's what it wants. Zionism is anti-Semitic at its core. And therefore, the argument that you'll hear from Zionists that, well, there's only one Jewish state and 25 Muslim states is false. Because they're not a single Muslim state that claims to be the nation state of all the Muslims. Saudi Arabia doesn't claim to represent anyone except Saudi Arabians. Syria doesn't claim to represent all the Muslims, it claims to represent only Syrians. Israel is the only country in the world, by the way, like this. There is no other country that claims to be the country of people who were never there, never lived there, never wanted to live there, have nothing to do with it. My family's from Poland. My family's from Poland. We were there for hundreds and hundreds of years. On my mother's side, they're from England, actually, and I'm an American. I have nothing to do with this country in the Middle East that was created in 1948. Nothing. To me, it's like Ukraine. It's like China. People come to me and ask me, what do you think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And I say, why are you asking me? Do I look Israeli? Do I look Palestinian? I'm neither Israeli or Palestinian. Asking me about what's going on between Israel and the Palestinians is the same as asking me what I think about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine or India and Kashmir. If somebody thinks that because I'm Jewish, I tell these people all the time, you think because I'm Jewish, therefore I'm connected to that conflict over there. My opinion is more meaningful than any other Americans. I have an obligation to weigh in on what's happening because I'm Jewish, then you, my friend, are a Zionist. Zionists believe that Jews all over the world are connected to Israel. Anti-Zionists, such as myself, say, and this is the solution, by the way. The first thing that needs to be done is that the Jews and Israel, in everybody's mind, need to be separated. What Japan is to the Japanese and France is to the French, Israel must be to the Israelis. And it is to the Israelis. I don't recognize Israel as the state of the Jews. That's insane. It's not Israel exists, and it claiming to be the state of the Jews is no different than, I don't know what, China claiming to be the state of the Jews. There are many Jews there. Half the world's Jews approximately live there. I got that, no problem. Once upon a time, there were massive Jewish populations in Babylon, which is today Iraq. Along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the entire Babylonian Talmud was written from that location. Nobody claimed Babylon was the state of the Jews. Okay? Israel is not the Jewish state. This is what they want. They insist on this. And it's a very big problem. And in other words, it's a very big problem. Israel doesn't exist. It's a big problem. And the problem is that when Israel does things, so the Jews get blamed. And the reason the Jews get blamed is simply because, look, you remember President Trump, the first time he was president, he called COVID the Chinese virus, right? So when he did that, there were people in Chinatown, a neighborhood in New York City, that got beaten up. That's criminal, no question about it. But that's what criminals do. They blame Chinese people for a Chinese virus. When when Japan bombs America, Americans are going to be angry at Japanese, and they wrongfully put Japanese in internment camps here, right? When America bombs Afghanistan, Afghanis are angry at America. When Israel bombs Gaza, who are Gazans and their allies going to be angry at? They should be angry at Israelis, because Israel's the one that bombed Gaza. I'm not saying you have a right to harm any civilians, not at all. But that's who they're angry at, right? And if you're a criminal, then you will harm people. Who are the people who they should be angry at? Israelis. But no, because Israel calls itself the Jewish state. When Israel bombs Gaza, people are angry at Jews because it's the Jewish state. Now, for all all I want from Israel is to get out of my life. Just stop calling yourself the Jewish state. Yes, there are Jews that not support Israel. There are Jews that agree with Israel being the state of the Jews. By the way, many people who identify as Zionists, when I explain to them what Zionism is, what Israel itself says, that Japan is to Japanese, what Israel is to the Jews, and I ask them, is Israel your country or America your country? They say, well, America is my country, but Israel is dear to me, or something to that effect. Meaning that according to Israel's own definition of Zionism, that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is its state, they're not even fully Zionists. Could be they're fully anti-Zionists because they disagree with Israel's being a Jewish state. But the problem is that, there are plenty of Jews that are Zionists, yes, and there are plenty of Christians that are evangelicals. But you can't go to the Pope, who's a Catholic, and tell him, explain what Israel's doing. Aren't Christians Zionists? He'll say, look, that's a different religion. The evangelicals are Protestants, they have their religion, we're Catholics, and I'm going to tell the Pope, in theory, oh, come on, Pope, you all believe in the New Testament, you all believe Jesus is the Messiah, you believe in a Trinity, whatever internal conflicts you have between you and the evangelicals, that's just a little internal conflict. You're all Christians. And the Pope, rightfully so, would say, no, you're wrong. You don't understand Christianity. We believe basically it's a different religion for all practical purposes. Now, I want to tell you that the difference between the Catholics and the evangelicals is less than the difference between anti-Zionist Jews and Zionists. It is the definition of the Jew, not the doctrine of Judaism. Not a question. Zionists will tell you nonsense. They'll say, I heard that in Australia a few weeks ago. There's a hearing now about anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, a royal hearing. And the judge asked one of the Zionists who were presenting, well, aren't there Jews who are anti-Zionists? So how could anti-Zionism be anti-Semitism? And the person said, well, no, it's just a nuance between us. They believe in a Jewish state too. It's just a question of the timing. They believe you have to wait for the Messiah. Now, this is a lie, an absolute lie, because not only it's true that that the Jews are not allowed to make a sovereign state now before the Messiah comes, even if it's not a real Jewish state. There will never be a Jewish state that claims to be the nation state of all Jews. Because Jews, there's no such thing as nation states. We're not a nationality. We're a religion. When the Messiah comes, we're going to have a resurrected from the dead King David on the throne. God is going to run the world, and we're going to be able to sit and study in the holiest place, in the holiest time in this is eschatology. Now you may say, George, you may say, Rabbi Shapiro, that sounds like religion. Well, it is. It's all religion. The Zionists made it nationality. What Israel is today, we don't want. That's not what we're praying for. It's not that they did a Jewish state too early. Nobody asked for what Israel is. Anti-Zionist Jews, we don't want what Israel is. Israel is a liability to the Jewish people. There's just nothing we can do about it. We're all stuck with it. The least we can do is to go on the mother of all talk shows and to announce to the entire world that Israel doesn't represent the Jews, and this that they say they're the state of the Jews is a anti-Semitic lie, and they're using me and other Jews as human shields.
Well, I think you perfectly took the opportunity to go on the mother of all talk shows and speak to our worldwide audience in the clearest possible terms, and so eloquently too. Rabbi, thank you very much indeed for a master class. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro in the United States, a proud American and a proud Jew. And why shouldn't he be? Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls, right up to Gayatri. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, as the polls close, I now address you as the Prime Minister of Great Britain. 92, 88, 83, 90, and 96% of you have elected me as Britain's Prime Minister. It doesn't mean much, but it means a lot more than Andy Burnham's claim to the chair, because absolutely nobody voted for him, whilst many thousands of you have voted for me. Thank you very much indeed for that. That was a remarkable performance, really, by one of the most distinguished anti-Zionist rabbis, and we probably won't have time to take too much of a response to that, but we will continue that debate by other means, in other forms, and in future calls. I don't know if the technicals are fixed yet, and I'm able to take any calls. I'm waiting for one to pop up on my screen, but while I am waiting, we do have one. It's just not on my screen. It's Robert in Jamaica, a very wise man indeed. Robert, welcome back.
Thank you, George. Thank you. I've been following your travels overseas and enjoying your program. You know, it's rather ironic that they voted you as Prime Minister, because my subject today is that we've won the public relations war with Israel and the genocide, but we've lost the political war. And the point you made is unbelievable to illustrate this. Burnham wasn't wasn't voted for by anyone. He was appointed and put in by the lobby. His entire lobby, his entire cabinet, I believe there are 14 Friends of Israel, who are of the 15, and the 15.
And boy, are they friends? I mean, we're talking very large sums of friendship money.
Exactly, and I think this is where the fight really is, and even more so in the U.S. Because if you cut off the funding for Israel, and the backing with the military, especially from the U.S., then Israel cannot survive because it's an unjust country, and the entire world is appalled by it. I really enjoyed the Rabbi, and I wish more Jews would speak out and disassociate themselves from Zionism. I have a hard time, and I want to congratulate you for doing it, because you always differentiate between Jews and Zionism. And if I didn't have a lot of Jewish friends, I would have thought ill of all Jews because of Zionism. And it's a cancer that needs to be cut away. But it's controlling politically, internationally, George. Controls the U.S. There's hope with some vote that it's changing. But recently, the Venezuelan government is now pro-Israeli, even by force. They use any method. They got the U.S. government to remove them. And the first thing they're doing is bringing in Israelis. The new Colombian president has ties with Israel. The new Chilean president, his first speech, he talks about Israel. And
whose father was a Nazi. Whose father was a Nazi who fled to Chile from Nazi Germany.
Yes, exactly. So I think people in all these countries should be aware of what's really at stake here. Argentina got $40 million from Trump at the behest of Israel, so that he could win the election. Now the people in Argentina, their eyes are opening and they're starting to rebel. But all these countries are going to be developing ICE-like, I want to term the word, ICE-like militias to keep the people in line. ICE is ostensibly for immigration, but I don't think it really is. Israel has manipulated that country. AIPAC has manipulated it. They know what is about to come. They know people are going to resist, and ICE is going to be there to keep people in line. I have never seen in America.
Yeah, although it's I understand that, Robert, but it's very difficult to keep the American people down because the American people are an armed people, and they have revolutionary spirit, and they have the right to bear arms. They have the right to form militia, and if Trump were to try and mobilize these somewhat overweight oafs of the ICE against the American people, they would quickly come cropper. That would be, of course, a very unpleasant situation, because it would mean a kind of civil war in the United States. It would mean civil conflict. But other countries where there is no revolutionary tradition and where the people do not have the right to bear arms are definitely vulnerable to that kind of development. And we must watch it very, very carefully. And it's good that you raise it, because we have now in Latin America a tide of Israeli-occupied Latin American countries, when the populations of those countries are overwhelmingly hostile to Israel and overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian. And they're having to paddle very furiously in order to get these new regimes into power. They are rigging elections, they are rigging counts of the elections, or they are not having elections at all, like Venezuela. The current so-called president was imposed on the end of American bayonets, and she could not possibly call an election because she would overwhelmingly lose it. So they appear on the surface to be strong. But the results of the American primary elections, for example, another two announced today, the AIPAC candidate loses every time. AIPAC is a busted flush. The Israel lobby in America is a busted flush. They're having to lie about their funding of the political class because the people have decided to turn. Thank you, Robert, in Jamaica. Femio Kenny, 2832, says, well done to the Rabbi for trying to educate us about Judaism and Zionism. They are not the same thing, in spite of what Israel and other people claim. Nikia 6571 says, I hope Graham from Jersey calls again. Interesting call. Was indeed a fascinating man. G.A. Aim Adi, U.S. journalist Tucker Carlson has said that people linked to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu approached him with material from Hunter Biden's laptop ahead of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Well, I saw that interview. It was a fascinating one, and I stand with Tucker. Christina Hines says Russia could have flattened the whole of Ukraine in one day if it so wished. Putin has behaved with incredible patience and strategy to avoid Ukrainian civilians being killed. And Joanna Naeri sends €6. Thank you, Joanna. I will never trust a catering cart again. I might get a nasty surprise. Brilliant. On line 2 in South Wales, in Britain, is Mohammed, who wants to talk about American soldiers and Iran. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Good evening to you, George. How are you? Okay?
By the grace of God, good, thanks. What would you like to say?
Okay. Well, what I want to say is, all the generals in American army, right, okay? They are very, very intelligent. Some of the majority of the soldiers are very, very intellect. But what I can't understand in my head is why are they going out there to get their soldier killed on behalf of this stupid government, Zionist, right? For no reason at all, right? It's nothing to do with America, right? These 7 wars, they had a agenda, Zionist agenda to destabilize the Middle East so they can be the dominating power, right, in the Middle East, and they can do whatever they want, control how they want to do it. And the thing is this, why in God's name are these American soldiers and the journals can't get it in their bloody thick head? Pardon my language, George. It really boils my blood, you know? Why we, the American...
Yeah, of course. Well, a lot of the generals are jumping ship, Mohammed, and 6 soldiers attempted to jump ship from the USS Abraham Lincoln. You remember from the last show, I coined the phrase, the Lincoln is stinking, because the sailors have been at sea for almost 300 days. They are sick of the sight of each other, sick of Donald Trump and the people that sent them there. They are unable properly to shower or have their clothes laundered. The toilets don't work. So much so that mutiny on the Lincoln is on the horizon. Thanks very much, Mohammed. Sorry, we're running out of time. A big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been on to MOATS.tv since we came on air. Carl Foreman, James Glass, who's a weekly donor. Thank you, James. Altania Dawn, John Falciani, and Dennis Freeman. A wonderful collection of people, many of them new and many of them regular donors. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Don't leave me tonight without leaving £1, €1, or $1. It's the least I'm worth, surely. don't pass me by having listened to me over the last 2 hours. Last call of the evening is Kevin in Pennsylvania. Kevin, welcome.
Hello, George. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome, mate.
Good to talk to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, the whole world's listening. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a first-time caller. I'm a long-time fan. And I, George, was never involved in politics in my life until Trump became the president. And then I registered to vote to try to help get him out of office. I voted again for the second time in my life. I'm 53 years old, by the way, in Philadelphia. And that didn't work, keeping him out of office. So here we are. You know, we have a pedophile running the free world, and it's not looking good.
Wow. Not looking good is the half of it, isn't it? It is a shame on America. America has become a laughing stock, and when we're not laughing, we're weeping at what has become of a great country, from sea to shining sea, represented by this mess, this putrefying mess of an individual, mentally and physically. And of course, he's got the gun. He's got the Gatling gun, and he's using it to gun people down, whether it's in the Pacific or whether it's schoolgirls in Iran or whether it's the guard of President Maduro in Venezuela, the invasion of Caracas, killed, I think, 32 or more of President Maduro's guards, and the president and his wife are now in a dungeon in New York. It's one crime after another, Kevin.
Yes. Oh, Lord. Thank God we have representatives like Mayor Mamdani getting elected, because other than that, with our 360 congressmen taking money from AIPAC and 62 sitting senators taking money from AIPAC, it seems like we are being run by Israel, to tell you the truth. And I didn't know.
Yeah, but a lot of them are now going down to defeat Kevin. Every time I look at a result now, the AIPAC candidate has lost. There'll not be many people volunteering to be an AIPAC nominee next time. Kevin, got to cut you short, because in the studio is the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Today, Zhu Rongji died in Beijing, age 97. Not many people have heard of him, but he was the premier of China between 1998 and 2003. Deng Xiaoping, people do know, and he at the time described Zhu Rongji as the only one who really understands economics. And of course, if Deng Xiaoping, who people know, was the architect of reform and opening up China, then Zhu Rongji was the builder. He got his hands dirty. He went and took on the premiership in 1998 when, amidst the Asian monetary crisis, and he did everything to handle it and to back Hong Kong, who was flooding under it 1 year before the handover. And he ended his premiership by entering China into the World Trade Organization. He was ruthless towards corruption, and he is often compared, because he was building the China we know today by opening up, as Yeltsin and Gorbachev. And so when he was asked by a Western journalist, "Are you the Gorbachev of China?" he answered, "No, I'm China's Zhu Rongji." So with the announcement of his death, I also want to close the show by commemorating the 100th birthday of Comandante Fidel Castro. Today, 13th August 2026.
Amen. Fidel will never be forgotten. Certainly never in our house, where his image is everywhere. And he will be remembered as the liberator of the global south, as the inspirer of rebels all over the world who rebelled against a world of war and exploitation. There he is there with one of my favorite heroes, Camilo Cienfuegos. We will never forget the Barbudos, the bearded men, who routed the empire's corrupt Generalissimo Batista. 100 years young. Fidel Castro will live forever. As to the late Chinese premier, let's go and visit his grave, if we can.
Good idea.
Maybe tomorrow, just when the flowers are building up. It was marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. We will be back again, God willing, on Sunday with the mothership of the Mother of All Sunday. And don't forget weapons that changed war that I am doing under the MOATS rubric with Larry Johnson. It's been marvelous. I'm now the Prime Minister. It's not every day you can say that. It's not every day you can say that you had a show which coincided exactly with a solar eclipse. I'm feeling lucky, and feeling lucky in China is half the battle. It's been marvelous. Thanks for joining us.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.